Tares at the foot of the mount. While praying that God should show us areas where we've lost His glory, I saw a young lion standing on a mountain, roaring with authority. As he roared, a bright and powerful beam of white light came out of his mouth. The lion had a wonderful view from the mountain, and as he roared, the other animals made their own sounds, e.g., the elephants were trumpeting and bowed down to him in obeisance. However, I noticed that the light from the lion's mouth began to blind him, and I saw a tiger flanked by a group of hyenas sneaking up on him to attack him. It was a successful ambush. They attacked the lion, throwing him down the mountain, and then the tiger was installed in his stead. As I watched, the lion was wounded and struggling at the foot of the mountain. I wondered what had led to his downfall and was taken back to while he was on the mountain. I noticed that while he had been there, he wore a red cape that covered his entire body. I could see through the cape, and beneath it there were many injuries. The lion refused to expose his wounds and submit to healing, choosing instead to perpetually remain in a place where he exuded glory and authority. I understood that he should have suspended that season of glory and subjected himself to a much-needed healing process. It seemed, however, that he was afraid of losing his place so much that he was not willing to let go of his place for even a moment of healing. It appeared that he was not even willing to entertain the thought of it. But then, what comes to mind is the story of Nebuchadnezzar. Though under God's judgment, his kingdom was kept secure by God's hand and restored to him after 7 years, cycles of insanity. Now, at the foot of the mountain, defeated and humiliated, the lion became broken and began to shed tears, which glowed with light. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying,
"Now you are broken. Now you are fit to truly house my glory."
The vision ended with me understanding that the story of the young lion represents a category of individuals, especially older brethren, people at a stage where they've been thrown down from their positions of authority and glory. I also had the impression that there were also two other important categories of people: those who are on the verge of being thrown down, and those who have been thrown down, but have not yet yielded to the hand of God, despite being in such a place of discipline. I also had the impression that it was not just about individuals amongst us, but also a warning to us as a house. We need to become broken vessels, humbling ourselves and submitting to all of God's processes. If we don't, God may have to break us by allowing our enemies to defeat us. It's not a new method. Ask the children of Israel. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, Judges 2, 11-23. Only when we're truly broken and acknowledge that we can't exercise God's authority on our own terms can we truly house His glory. As I prayed today, I continued yesterday's vision. I had already sensed that the earlier vision was just one part of a bigger whole. I was taken back to the foot of the mountain, where the lion, now broken, was weeping. After the voice from heaven had spoken, the lion was now faced with a new conflict. Over his head, I saw an open vision of light and darkness clashing, more like flashes of lightning trying to pierce through thick darkness. That is, I saw it as an open vision in the primary vision I was having. Alongside this open vision were voices speaking to the young lion. On one hand, the voice from heaven from earlier was giving him instructions and directions. On the other hand, he was seeing visions that were countering what the voice from heaven was saying to him. I heard that these visions were the voice of Satan. At a point, I also heard the voice from heaven called the voice of the Father. As this conflict kept going on, I then heard
The voice of faith versus the voice of sight.
the voice from heaven equals the voice of the Father equals the voice of faith. The visions the lion was seeing equals the voice of Satan equals the voice of sight. The voice of sight kept showing him visions to discourage him. whispering the lies that surrendering to God's process would lead only to pain. In one such vision, the lion was shown himself submitting to a veterinary doctor to be treated and healed of the wounds he had hidden beneath the red cape. The doctor was applying a healing balm, which looked like aboniki. It was in fact hot and uncomfortable. Though painful, the balm was healing him. The problem, however, was that what the lion was seeing in the vision was not a doctor, but a taskmaster with a harsh whip, inflicting more pain on him. The vet doctor, wearing a white coat, is what I was shown as the reality of things. But the lion's perception was distorted by the enemy's projections. At this point, I began to realize just how hopeless it was for this lion to depend on the visions he was seeing. One of the strongest tactics of the voice of sight was to bring up old wounds. Voice of sight kept showing him visions of his past, specifically when he was just a young cub and was actually mistreated and abused by a man dressed like an Egyptian taskmaster. He held a whip with metal tips and had been brutalizing him as a cub. As long as he was seeing this vision repeatedly and not intentionally tuning in to listen to the voice of heaven, the unavoidable pain/heat that came from the vet's healing balm was as good as reliving the torture of this taskmaster, a brutal figure who once hurt him deeply. Voice of sight kept twisting the truth.
This vet? He's just another taskmaster. Healing will only bring more pain.
So the lion feared healing, resisting surrender, believing that the soothing balm would only burn like the whip. This strategy of deception was what nearly made the young lion choose the bridge of snakes later on. At some point, the voice from heaven, that is, the voice of faith, called out to him,
Come to the river. Come to the river.
Eventually, the lion obeyed and walked away from the mountain toward the river. But as he moved, the voice of sight warned him again through many visions.
If you leave the mountain and go to the river, you lose your place of authority forever.
As the lion journeyed towards the river, the vision was interrupted, and I was taken to the end and shown a glimpse of what would happen if you chose to follow the voice of faith to the end. At the end of the journey, the lion was restored to his place on the mountain, but he was no longer just a lion. He had become a griffin, a majestic fusion of lion and eagle. When this griffin let out a roar, it wasn't just the voice of a lion, it was a composite cry. There was the roar of a lion, the screech of an eagle, and a chorus of many voices in one. I realized that these were the voices of the various animals that had once bowed before him. Now, as they bowed and made their sounds, their voices were resonating through him. The impression I received was like scenes from Avatar: The Last Airbender, when the Avatar enters the Avatar state, and past lives speak through him. That's how the griffin sounded, like many generations roaring in one. Then the setting zoomed out. I noticed that the mountain was at the heart of a great forest, surrounded by gigantic cedar trees. I was lifted up and shown from above, and I saw that giants had been secretly surrounding the mountain all along, hidden among the trees. I saw mighty beings that reminded me of the Makai and the Cyclops, especially in the movie The Wrath of the Titans. These beings bring to mind the revelations I had in January about the Nephilim, which had been coming to mind again recently. The sound of the griffin's cry echoed within the trees, and suddenly the giants were gripped with sudden fear. They began to turn on each other, attacking themselves in confusion. One by one, they fell to the ground, some terribly weakened, some dead. It reminded me of this passage on the 4 lepers in 2 Kings 7:6, who went out to the Aramean camp seeking food. The Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army. Something I couldn't help but notice was that the griffin, despite his restored authority, which was greater than at the beginning, was not exuding pride like the young lion. Instead, he was now humble, broken, and very conscious of his true calling, to be a voice for the animals and to the animals. He stood as a servant leader, a mediator, intercessor, a mouthpiece of many, not an overlord. After this glimpse of glory, I was brought back to the lion's present moment, still walking toward the river, trying to obey the voice from heaven, the voice of faith. As the lion moved toward the river, the battle of voices intensified. The voice of sight still kept throwing visions at him and whispering lies, trying to discourage him.
Submitting to God will only hurt you.
The false images of pain and failure kept getting worse. Meanwhile, the voice from heaven kept guiding him with a soft but reassuring voice. At this point, this scripture came to mind, Isaiah 30:21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." Then, it seemed the voice of heaven suddenly switched to talking to me, and not just the lion.
The prophets among you must stop living by sight. They must learn to live by faith, even in their seasons of blindness, especially when their prophetic flow seems shut. They must tune in to the voice of faith, not relying on visions and manifestations alone, and avoid falling prey to deception by trying to force encounters.
I thought, does it mean that every prophet or prophetic person must go through seasons of blindness? I asked this because it sounded like the voice of heaven was expecting that every prophetic person would be blind at some point. This is the response I got.
Blindness may come as a result of disobedience, but faith can still hear, even when sight fails.
The young lion was now very close to the river, but then there was a huge gutter just before the river. He noticed that there was a way to cross, a bridge made entirely of black, slippery snakes. It appeared to be the only way to cross to the river. To make it worse, from a distance, the river itself looked murky and uninviting. But then, it was all a lie, courtesy the voice of sight. Then, the veil of sight was lifted. It seemed that because the lion had been able to obey the voice of faith for this long, it had become easier to discern between the voice of sight and the voice from heaven. The lion saw the truth. The river, thick and oily, was full of radiant light. It shimmered with golden and white light, blinding beams bouncing from its surface. It definitely was not the dark and murky reality he had earlier seen. Then came a pivotal instruction. The voice of faith said,
Don't walk on the bridge of snakes. Walk beside it, over the air.
It made no logical sense. There was no visible path. It was like walking across a deep gutter with nothing to hold him, but he had to choose. 1. Walk over the bridge of snakes, the visible, logical, but dangerous path which would eventually make the river a dark and murky reality for him. 2. Walk on air, the invisible, faith-led, but miraculous path which would end up in only what God can do. As the young lion stood before the bridge of snakes, the voice of sight kept whispering,
They are dead. Don't be afraid. They're just dead snakes. Harmless.
And they did look very harmless. Long dead. So, the lion chose to believe sight this time around. He began his journey on the bridge. And truthfully, there was no harm, or so he thought. Just as he was about to have totally crossed fully, the snakes suddenly came to life, their fangs flashing, their bodies tightening around his legs. They bit him repeatedly, injecting poison over and over again as he bled profusely. Now twice bruised, twice broken, and twice desperate, the lion limped toward the river, hoping to be healed. But the river, which he had seen through the eyes of sight, was not as it appeared. No, it wasn't just dark and murky. It had something more sinister hiding in it. He had barely gotten to the river when suddenly, black, shadowy hands, apparition-like, emerged from the water. They grabbed him, dragged him in, and drowned him in the river. He was consumed, dead forever. But what if he chose to walk on air? The vision rewound, showing the lion if he had gone with the other choice. This time, he obeyed the voice of faith, choosing to walk on air. As he put forward the first paw on the chasm/gutter, hands made of light emerged beneath him to hold him up, and then more of these hands appeared in front of him and over the chasm, shaping an invisible pathway across. Yes, I could see them, but he couldn't. He crossed safely. As soon as he reached the other side, all the wounds on his body were instantly healed. Wounds from beneath the red cape and from when he was thrown down from the mount. But I realized one thing. Though the scars vanished, the pain remained. He could still feel pain in his bones. He stepped into the river of light, and as he did, a big radiant hand reached out from the waters and began to wash his face, his eyes, and his mane. Gradually, the brown lion transformed into a white lion, pure, noble, reborn. As he drank deeply from the river, a massive eagle rose from within the waters and swallowed him whole. A moment of silence followed, as the eagle then went deep into the water. Then, something incredible happened. The eagle began to morph. It became a griffin, a fusion of lion and eagle. The lion seemed to have become something entirely new. It was at this point that he was whole. No scars, no pain. Now he was afloat, on top of the river. But he did not leave the river immediately. He remained, resting, learning. From time to time, instructors came to him there. They were as lecturers sent from heaven. I noticed that they were mostly prophets from the scriptures, especially Elisha and Joel. There were others, but these two are the names that stuck. As he continued to stay and they taught him, he was no longer that young lion. He was now a mature, mighty beast, shaped by truth and light. And this was how the young lion became the griffin I had seen earlier restored upon the mountain. The glorious griffin was the lion who had obeyed the voice of faith, passed through the river of light, submitted to instruction, and was now seated again on the mount of authority, infused with wisdom, humility, and power. 8th July, 2025. Brother S.E. Gam Watch.